You're about to hear about the day a routine diplomatic arrival at JFK Airport uncovered something that made federal agents go pale. I'm talking about a plot so dangerous, so well-funded, and so close to execution that it kept the FBI director awake for 72 straight hours. This wasn't just drug money. This wasn't just organized crime. This was terrorism financing hidden inside one of the world's most protected systems. And the man carrying it, he had diplomatic immunity. He couldn't be touched, couldn't be searched, couldn't even be questioned. Or so he thought. Stay with me, because what happened next changed how America screens diplomatic passengers forever. It was September 4th, 2019, early afternoon at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. Terminal 4 was packed with international arrivals, thousands of passengers streaming through customs from dozens of countries. Among them was a man who walked with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. His name was Ambassador Karim Al-Rashid, supposedly a junior cultural attaché from a small Middle Eastern embassy in Washington, D.C. He'd just arrived on Emirates Flight 202 from Dubai. He carried a Ghanaian diplomatic passport, an expensive suit, and a black titanium briefcase that never left his hand. Not for a second. Diplomatic passengers have a separate screening process. They don't go through the regular customs lines where officers can ask questions and inspect luggage. They flash their credentials, their passports get stamped, and they walk through a dedicated channel. It's called diplomatic courtesy, and it exists because of international agreements going back decades. Without it, global diplomacy would collapse. Countries need to trust that their representatives can travel freely. But here's the problem with trust. Sometimes it gets abused, and Karim Al-Rashid had been abusing it for almost 3 years. Senior Diplomatic Liaison Officer Patricia Okonkwo was the person who processed Karim that day. She'd been working the diplomatic channel for 8 years, and she knew every regular face, every embassy staffer who flew in and out of New York for UN meetings or consular business. Karim wasn't a regular. She'd seen him maybe 4 times in the past year, always arriving from Dubai, always staying less than 48 hours, always carrying that same briefcase. And here's what made her instincts fire. Diplomats travel with luggage. They have meetings, they attend events, they need clothes and documents and all the things business travelers carry. But Karim, just the briefcase, no checked bags, no carry-on, nothing else. Patricia logged his arrival as protocol required and watched him head toward the exit. But something nagged at her. She'd been reading intelligence bulletins lately about terror financing networks using diplomatic channels. The warnings were specific. Watch for patterns of rapid travel, minimal luggage, routes through Gulf states, known for hawala money transfer systems, and individuals whose diplomatic credentials didn't match their travel frequency. Karim checked every single box. Patricia made a decision. She picked up her phone and called Agent Marcus Webb at the Joint Terrorism Task Force office located right inside JFK. She told him she had a feeling about someone, and could he run a background check real quick. Webb had worked with Patricia before and trusted her instincts. He said he'd look into it. What Webb found in the next 20 minutes changed everything. Karim Al-Rashid's diplomatic passport was legitimate, issued by Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs 8 months earlier. But when Webb dug deeper through classified databases, red flags started appearing. The passport had been issued through an expedited process that bypassed normal vetting, something that happens occasionally but requires high-level approval. The approving official was a deputy minister who'd since been suspended pending corruption investigations. Karim's listed position was cultural attaché, but he'd never attended a single cultural event, never given a presentation, never participated in any activity that a cultural attaché would normally do. His embassy in D.C. had no record of him attending staff meetings or filing any reports. But here's where it got really interesting. Webb cross-referenced Karim's travel records through a classified system that tracks patterns across multiple databases. Over the past 3 years, Karim had made 47 trips between Dubai and the United States. 47. That's more than once a month, every month, for 3 solid years. Each trip lasted between 24 and 72 hours. He would land, disappear into the city, then fly back to Dubai. No hotel charges on any credit cards, no rental car records, no digital footprint at all. For someone supposedly working in cultural diplomacy, his behavior looked more like a courier. And couriers in the terror financing world move one thing: cash. Webb immediately escalated to his supervisor, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Jennifer Santos. Santos made a call to the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service and another to the Treasury Department's Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. Within an hour, they had a conference call running with a dozen people from different agencies. The question on everyone's mind: what's in that briefcase? But here's the legal nightmare. Diplomatic immunity means you cannot search a diplomat's belongings without explicit permission from their government. And requesting that permission would alert Karim's handlers that he was under investigation, potentially causing them to shut down their operation and disappear. They needed another approach. Agent Santos made a decision that was risky but legal. They would conduct what's called a consensual encounter. An officer would approach Karim in the public area of the airport, outside the customs zone, and try to engage him in conversation. Not an interrogation, not a detention, just a friendly chat. If Karim volunteered information or opened the briefcase voluntarily, anything they observed would be admissible. It was a long shot, but they had to try. They tracked Karim through the airport's security cameras. He'd left the terminal and was heading toward the taxi line. Agent Webb and Officer Patricia Okonkwo approached him just as he was about to get into a cab. Webb introduced himself casually, said they were conducting routine follow-ups with diplomatic travelers, just wanted to make sure everything went smoothly with his arrival. Karim's face remained neutral, but his grip on the briefcase tightened. He said everything was fine. He was in a hurry. He had an important meeting. Webb asked where the meeting was, just making conversation. Karim hesitated for half a second before saying, "Manhattan, a cultural exchange program." Webb smiled and asked which one, because his wife worked in arts education and was always interested in international programs. That's when Karim made his first mistake. He couldn't name a program. He said something vague about independent galleries and contemporary art, but it was clear he was making it up as he went. Webb noticed sweat forming on Karim's forehead despite the cool September weather. Patricia, playing the friendly liaison officer, asked if he needed help arranging transportation to the embassy, or if he wanted them to call ahead to confirm his arrival. Karim said no, a bit too quickly, a bit too forcefully. He insisted he was fine and needed to leave immediately. Webb let him go. They had to. Without probable cause or consent, they couldn't detain a diplomatic passport holder. Karim got into the taxi and disappeared into New York traffic. But Webb wasn't worried. They'd already done something much more important. While Patricia was talking to Karim, Webb had been observing the briefcase. He'd positioned himself at an angle where he could see the side lock, and he'd noticed something crucial. There was a small manufacturer's mark, a model number barely visible on the titanium edge. It was a Rimowa diplomatic case, a specific model designed for high-security document transport. And Webb knew from his training that this particular model had a feature. It weighed 14 pounds empty. The case Karim was carrying looked heavier. Much heavier. The way his arm strained slightly, the way he shifted his grip, suggested it weighed at least 40 or 50 pounds. Back at the Joint Terrorism Task Force Operations Center, the investigation kicked into high gear. They pulled every piece of intelligence they had on Karim Al-Rashid. Financial records showed he maintained 3 bank accounts in the United States, all opened within the past 3 years using his diplomatic status. The accounts received regular wire transfers from companies registered in Dubai, Hong Kong, and Panama. The amounts were always just under $10,000, carefully structured to avoid automatic reporting requirements. Over 3 years, roughly $4 million had moved through these accounts. The money would sit for a few days, then be withdrawn in cash or transferred to a complex web of other accounts. But Treasury analysts noticed something even more alarming. Some of the companies sending money to Karim's accounts were shell corporations that had appeared in previous terrorism financing investigations. One company in Dubai had been flagged 2 years earlier for sending money to individuals connected to extremist groups in East Africa. Another company in Panama shared a registered agent with businesses that had been sanctioned for supporting terrorist organizations. The connections weren't definitive proof, but they were too numerous to be coincidental. Karim wasn't just moving money. He was moving money with a specific source and a specific destination. The FBI obtained a warrant to monitor Karim's movements through cell tower data and surveillance cameras across New York. They tracked him to a small money service business in Brooklyn, the kind of place that offers wire transfers, check cashing, and currency exchange. These businesses are legal and serve important purposes for immigrant communities, but they're also vulnerable to exploitation because they handle large amounts of cash and don't always have sophisticated compliance systems. Karim went inside for 37 minutes. When he came out, the briefcase looked noticeably lighter. Agents immediately obtained an emergency warrant and raided the money service business. What they found confirmed their worst fears. The business owner, a man named Hassan Mahmoud, had records of receiving over $3 million in cash from Karim over the past 2 years. The cash was being converted into cryptocurrency, split into thousands of small transactions to avoid detection, then moved through a complex series of digital wallets before ultimately ending up in accounts controlled by individuals in Syria, Yemen, and Somalia. Mahmoud's computer contained encrypted files that, once broken, revealed the entire operation. This wasn't drug money being laundered. This was terrorism financing on a massive scale. Here's how the scheme worked, and it was devastatingly simple. Karim would collect donations from wealthy supporters in the Gulf states, people who sympathized with extremist ideologies but didn't want their names directly connected to terrorist organizations. The money would be funneled through seemingly legitimate businesses and sent to Karim's U.S. bank accounts in small increments. Karim would then fly to the United States using his diplomatic passport, which meant he could carry large amounts of undeclared cash without being searched. He would withdraw cash from his accounts, pack it in the briefcase, and deliver it to Mahmoud's money service business. Mahmoud would convert it to cryptocurrency and send it overseas, where it would fund operations, purchase weapons, and support terrorist cells. The briefcase itself was brilliant in its simplicity. Diplomatic pouches and cases are protected under the Vienna Convention. They cannot be opened or detained. Karim was essentially using international law as a shield, flying back and forth like a human armored car, moving millions of dollars that would otherwise be impossible to transport without detection. And because he kept each cash delivery under $100,000, he stayed below the threshold that would trigger automatic law enforcement alerts even for diplomats. But the investigation revealed something even more chilling. Analysis of Mahmoud's financial records showed that over $2 million had been sent to a specific cell operating in East Africa. Intelligence agencies had been tracking this cell for months. They were planning an attack on a U.S. embassy in the region, stockpiling explosives and recruiting operatives. The money Karim was moving wasn't just supporting general terrorist activities. It was funding an active plot against American targets. The timeline suggested the attack was planned for some time in the next 3 months. The FBI faced a delicate situation. They couldn't arrest Karim directly because of his diplomatic immunity. If they violated that immunity, it would create an international incident and set a dangerous precedent. Other countries could retaliate by arresting American diplomats abroad. But they couldn't let him continue operating either. Every day he remained free was another day the terror cell he was funding could advance their plans. The solution required coordination at the highest levels of government. The State Department contacted Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs through secure diplomatic channels. They presented the evidence: travel records, financial transactions, surveillance footage, and Mahmoud's testimony once he agreed to cooperate. They requested that Ghana immediately revoke Karim's diplomatic credentials and waive his immunity so he could face prosecution in the United States. The conversation was tense. Ghana's government was embarrassed that their diplomatic system had been compromised and concerned about their international reputation. But faced with overwhelming evidence and the threat of being labeled a state that harbors terrorism financiers, they agreed. The revocation happened at 8 o'clock in the morning on September 6th, exactly 41 hours after Karim had landed at JFK. The moment his immunity was officially waived, FBI agents moved in. They arrested him at a hotel in Midtown Manhattan, where he'd been staying under a false name. When they searched his room, they found the briefcase. Inside were $380,000 in cash, neatly stacked and banded, ready for his next delivery to Mahmoud's business. They also found 2 encrypted phones with messages detailing his entire operation, including contact information for his handlers in Dubai and instructions for future deliveries. Karim was charged with conspiracy to provide material support to terrorism, money laundering, and wire fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Mahmoud, facing his own terrorism financing charges, cooperated fully and provided detailed testimony about how the network operated. The investigation expanded internationally. Authorities in the UAE arrested 3 individuals who had been sending money to Karim's accounts. Financial institutions in Panama and Hong Kong froze accounts linked to the shell companies. And most importantly, intelligence agencies in East Africa were able to disrupt the planned embassy attack. The terror cell was arrested before they could execute their operation, and explosives were seized from a safe house outside Nairobi. The total amount of money Karim had moved through this scheme? Over $8 million across 3 years. $8 million that funded terrorist operations, purchased weapons, recruited extremists, and planned attacks against civilians and diplomatic targets. The FBI estimated that dismantling this financing network prevented at least 3 major terrorist attacks that had been in various stages of planning. But the impact went beyond just these specific plots. The investigation revealed vulnerabilities in how diplomatic immunity was being exploited, leading to new protocols and screening procedures. After Karim's arrest, the State Department worked with international partners to strengthen diplomatic vetting processes. They created a new intelligence sharing system that flags suspicious travel patterns among diplomatic personnel, even before they enter the country. Treasury expanded monitoring of accounts opened by diplomats, looking for the kind of structured transactions that Karim had used. And airport security implemented new procedures for diplomatic arrivals, including enhanced observation protocols that don't violate immunity protections but allow trained officers to identify suspicious behavior patterns. Karim Al-Rashid was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. His handlers in Dubai were arrested by UAE authorities and faced their own prosecutions. Hassan Mahmoud, the money service business owner, received a reduced sentence of 12 years in exchange for his cooperation and testimony. The shell companies used to move money were shut down, and several financial institutions faced penalties for failing to properly monitor suspicious transactions. The case also exposed corruption within Ghana's foreign ministry. The deputy minister who had expedited Karim's diplomatic passport was arrested and charged with accepting bribes from individuals connected to the operation. Ghana implemented sweeping reforms to its diplomatic credential issuance process, including mandatory background checks and regular reviews of all diplomatic personnel. The scandal damaged Ghana's international reputation temporarily, but their swift action to revoke Karim's immunity and cooperate with the investigation ultimately demonstrated their commitment to combating terrorism. Intelligence gathered from Karim's phones and computers led to dozens of additional investigations across 4 continents. Law enforcement agencies discovered that the network he was part of had been operating for over a decade, using various couriers and methods to move money. Karim was just one piece of a much larger operation, but his arrest provided the breakthrough investigators needed to understand how the entire system functioned. Within 18 months, authorities had arrested 73 individuals connected to the network, seized over $40 million in assets, and disrupted multiple planned attacks. The story of the diplomat's briefcase serves as a powerful reminder that terrorism threats aren't always obvious. They don't always involve suspicious packages or nervous passengers. Sometimes they involve people who blend in perfectly, who use their status and credentials as camouflage, who exploit the very systems designed to facilitate international cooperation. And sometimes, all it takes is one observant officer who notices that something doesn't quite add up. If you found this story eye-opening, you need to hear about the family of 5 who tried to smuggle weapons components across the Canadian border disguised as camping equipment, or the flight attendant who used her crew access to run a $1 million identity theft ring. These stories are real. They're happening right now at airports and borders around the world, and they show that security isn't just about technology and procedures. It's about people who stay alert, who trust their training, and who refuse to let anything slide just because it seems routine. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode of Border Watch Stories. Leave a comment telling me which aspect of border security fascinates you most. And remember, the next time you're at an airport, those security officers aren't just going through motions. They're the thin line between safety and catastrophe.